My father loved silence. He believed noise was the mark of lesser people, so he installed a decibel meter in our home. Speaking above 40 decibels meant that we would have to pay him $10, laughing above 60 decibels meant $50, and crying or throwing a tantrum was a serious offense at $100 per second. The year I turned 4, I fell and broke my arm. I did not make a single sound. I bit down so hard that I cracked 2 teeth, but I saved thousands in noise fees. He praised me for it and called me a high-value child, one that was worth the investment. I treasured that compliment and observed the rules carefully, keeping the house wrapped in suffocating silence. Then came the stormy night. A thief broke in. He had a knife and was creeping toward my mother as she slept, and I watched it all from the gap in the wardrobe where I was hiding. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shriek and wake my father, to do something, anything. However, my eyes drifted to the decibel meter on the wall, and my hand found nothing but an empty pocket. I did not have enough allowance. One scream would cost hundreds, and I simply could not afford it. The walls of our home were white, while the numbers on the decibel meter were red. It was the most obvious thing in the house. I sat at the dining table staring at the number on the display. 28, it was safe, for now. Dad sat at the head of the table, holding a newspaper and turning the pages, barely making any sound. Mom was in the kitchen, and the sound of her chopping vegetables was so careful and measured it was almost inaudible. I did not dare breathe too deeply. Even breathing too loudly came with a fee. Dad had explained it once. Air itself was free, but the air inside our home had been bought and paid for when he purchased the house. If you used a resource, you paid for it. In front of me sat a bowl of plain chicken broth with noodles and no meat. Meat cost extra, and my account balance was insufficient. The week before, I had accidentally knocked a glass off the table. The glass itself was $5. The cleaning fee was $10. The disruption fee was $20, and the decibel meter had spiked to 80, which added another $200 in fines. My allowance had been docked into the negative, so this week it was plain broth. Gary, she's still growing, Mom said as she carried a dish out from the kitchen, her voice suppressed to barely a whisper. The decibel meter flickered to 35, still within the safe zone. Dad set down his newspaper and adjusted his glasses. Sandra, rules are rules. She broke a glass, she made noise, and thus she must bear the consequences. That's what accountability is. Mom bit her lip and said nothing. She set a plate of roasted chicken at the center of the table. The smell drifted over and I gulped. Then my stomach let out a sound entirely on its own, a low, involuntary growl. I looked up at the wall in horror. 41. Dad's fork paused in midair. He reached for his phone and opened the black accounting app. Stomach noise, 1 decibel over the limit. A fine of $10 has been added to your tab. You now owe me $245. I lowered my head as tears gathered at the corners of my eyes. I could not cry. Crying would cost me $100 per second, and I could not afford it. I clenched my jaw and forced the tears back. Eat, Dad said, lifting a piece of chicken onto his own plate. Remember, there's no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as free noise either. The doorbell rang, sharp and urgent. The decibel meter jumped to 70, and Dad's brow creased, his expression darkening. Some people have no manners at all. Mom hurried to the door, and the moment it opened, my Aunt Lisa burst in. She was carrying a large cake box and an enormous Lego set under one arm, her voice filling the entire room before she had even stepped inside. Jenny, happy birthday. The decibel meter went wild. 75, 80, 85. Dad's expression hardened. Entry fee, $50. Noise fee, $300. Cash or check? Aunt Lisa stopped dead in her tracks. She looked at the decibel meter on the wall, then at me, curled up in my chair. Gary, are you out of your mind? Today is Jenny's 5th birthday, and you're charging me a noise fee? Dad rose from his seat and positioned himself in front of her. This is my home. In my house, you follow my rules. And this cake, and these toys, did I approve of them? There's no room in this house for this kind of clutter. Aunt Lisa's hands were shaking with anger. She set the cake down on the table with a loud thud, and the decibel meter maxed out. I'm not taking it back. Jenny, come here. Let me cut you a piece of cake. She reached for my hand and her fingers were warm, but I did not move. I looked to Dad instead. Jenny, he said, your choice. Eat the cake and your debt doubles this week.